Hello and welcome to the second in our series, The Best is SaaS. And today we're jumping into a subject that I know absolutely nothing about, so I can be quiet for most of this podcast. It's a subject that an awful lot of early stage SaaS founders get wrong or don't understand the relevance of. Today we're looking at critical SaaS metrics, the financial SaaS metrics and why they matter. And I'm really excited to say that today I have as my special guest, Simon Smith, who is the CEO of Infinite CFO. Good afternoon, Simon. Thank you for joining the podcast. Tell us a little bit more about Infinite CFO.
Hi, Richard. Thanks, first of all, for inviting me. So Infinite CFO is a virtual fractional finance function for growth businesses. So we typically work with founder-led, investor-backed, high-growth businesses. Many of those companies are in technology, but not exclusively. And we do the soup to nuts provision of finance, everything from bookkeeping all the way through management accounting, financial planning and analysis, and obviously CFO advisory services.
Brilliant. So if you don't want to bring in a full-time CFO, it's not the right time. Worth giving infinitecfo.com, dropping them an email or giving them a call and talking about what your needs and requirements are. Let's dive straight into it. What I'm going to do today, Simon, if it's okay, is I'm going to dive into a presentation which we've put together. And I thought for the benefit of sort of speed, we'll go very quickly through sort of the metrics that most people are very familiar with and actually spend a little bit longer on some of the metrics, which may be the first time people have ever heard metrics like this or unit economic terms like this. I think it's the SaaS metrics that are a little bit more confusing than some of the unit economics, which I think a lot of people have got their heads around. Let's dive into that presentation, which for those of you watching is on screen now. If you're in the podcast, I will attach this presentation to the podcast. So please download it and have it to hand. But this is the unit SaaS metrics and unit economics guide. And as a starting point, what we're going to cover is the different sorts of SaaS metrics that there are. And then we're going to introduce unit economics just so that people understand the difference between those two terms, SaaS metrics and unit economics. And then we're going to take a deep dive into the core SaaS metrics, then a deep dive into the important unit economics, and then probably wrap up after that. But I think what's extremely important to kick off in this section, and this is where I'd love your insight, Simon, is why do SaaS metrics matter? Why are they so important that founders get their SaaS metrics right?
I think firstly, we have to look back a bit into the history of them. And before SaaS became a thing, companies were measured on a typical financial metrics of revenue growth and EBITDA profitability. In a SaaS environment where you are essentially postponing revenue for the future. So instead of selling, as happened in the past, license-based revenue where you capture that revenue up front, a SaaS business is postponing that and getting an annuity revenue stream for subscription revenue. And so those old metrics don't really work. It's hard to paint a positive picture when you're postponing revenue in that way.
So it's very difficult from the outside looking in, is what you're saying, from in a SaaS business to understand how the business is performing below the kind of surface level metrics that exist. Is that right? It's difficult from the outside looking in.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think the metrics are being developed to give that insight and to, as we'll get into, to provide information that's not only useful internally within the company, but also that investors can use to judge the quality of the business. And I think you use the phrase, "Are you a vitamin or a painkiller?" I think you will see that businesses with strong SaaS metrics, with strong unit economics, tend to be those ones that are painkiller applications as opposed to vitamins, nice to have.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. The lesson that I learned in all my days as a SaaS founder was this is non-negotiable, right? This isn't something you play at. This isn't something that you muck about at. You have to get your SaaS metrics right. It determines much better decision-making internally. As you say, these are the numbers that investors stare at and put huge value into so that they can evaluate your scalability and your efficiency as a business. And if you can get this data discipline in the business from day one, get it in your DNA, it makes your job as a CFO far easier. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. But it's more than that, I think, because as a founder, you have 1,000 things to do. And I'm sure accounting and finance stuff is at the back of most people's mind when they're building a product. But the fact is that you're building up a big problem for the future. So when you do go out to raise money, if you haven't collected the data that allows you to do those SaaS metrics, to do the calculations, you're going to have a job of work to do, and that can delay your sort of investor process. Investors are going to want to see these. And so you're going to have to bring in someone like me to actually start putting them together if you don't have them already.
Yeah. It's a bit like being at school, isn't it, with your homework? If you don't turn up with your homework, you're sent home to go and do it. And if you go to an investor pitch meeting without these metrics, without these clean metrics, don't forget to pick up your wooden spoon on the way home. So let's dive into the difference between SaaS metrics and unit economics. So let's start off with SaaS metrics and run through these, some from the very obvious down to the more less well-known. Perhaps the most obvious SaaS metrics out there are MRR and ARR. Quite simply, your monthly recurring revenue and your annual recurring revenue. Simon, this is contracted, isn't it? This is under contract. How much recurring revenue are you receiving every month?
Yeah, that's right. So if you think about a subscription business, whether they're charging customers annually or on a monthly basis, then it should be it's generally a fixed amount of revenue that you're recognizing. And that is the thing that investors value in SaaS businesses. They're looking for that repeatability, as opposed to the old licensed software businesses who would have revenue that varied month to month.
Yeah, absolutely. And that ARR number is how great things happen above £1 million of ARR, or less than that if you're growing very rapidly. Very simply, we'll move on from that one. Monitor it. It's what you'll be judged on. It's the kind of distance you've traveled is captured in your ARR. And then two really important numbers that often get mixed up. And we'll come back to these, which are, because we're going to dive into GRR, the gross revenue retention, and net revenue retention numbers in more detail. So let's pass on those because we'll come back to those in a minute. Other SaaS metrics that most people won't have heard of maybe is quick ratio and magic number, which is a measure for measuring your growth efficiency. And then there's the rule of 40 and your burn multiple, which are all your profitability metrics. Now we're going to come back to those. We're going to dive into each of those in more detail and just download your wisdom on what they are. The reason why I'm running through this is I want to compare those SaaS metrics to a different set of terms, which is what's called unit economics. And these, unlike SaaS metrics, which I think focus on the sort of profitability and general health of the business, I think I'm right in saying the unit economics focus specifically on the profitability per customer. Is that right? Is that the difference between the two?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It boils it down into its core theme of what does it cost to win a customer? What does that customer bring you during the lifetime that customer is with you? And the ratios, payback period, the lifetime value to CAC ratio are all about, does that make sense? So if you were to double down on sales and marketing costs, what you can extrapolate the unit economics from there to work out what that could do for your revenue forecast and your overall business performance.
Yeah, brilliant. I always remember it by unit, as in unit being customer. So it's kind of unit, one customer. What are the unit economics? Is this customer profitable? How long does it take to recover the money that you spent on acquiring that customer? And again, we'll dive into all of these in more detail later in the masterclass. But it's the profitability of the customer. It's invaluable because if you're spending more money acquiring customers than you ever make on having that customer for the life of that contract, you really do have challenges. And getting early heads up on these unit economics doesn't half help when you are running your software business. So let's get into
it's absolutely that, because you also get the chance to course correct, which you don't necessarily if you're looking at a sort of a broad set of financial statements. The unit economics really allow you to drill in on where your challenges are.
Yeah. And having been a founder many times, anything that can give you early warning is a good thing, because as you say, there's a million things going on in your life and in your business. Unit economics give you very strong early warning signals or good news signals. We're acquiring customers really efficiently, really effectively, low customer acquisition cost, hacking the CAC, as well, you'll hear us use that phrase, is a really good sign for investors. Better to find out early than find out when things are later on down the line. So let's jump into the SaaS metrics. So we'll come back to the unit economics, the profitability per customer. Let's go back to the profitability of the organization. We're not going to spend long on monthly recurring revenue, but simply it's the number of customers you have multiplied by the monthly subscription price. And it's a predictable revenue subscription amount of money coming in each month. Is that the best way to describe it?
Yeah, it's absolutely that. So I think the other thing to say is it excludes a number of things like professional services revenue, if you have any, and one-off, or what people politely call reoccurring revenue nowadays, which is revenue it's not subscription type. It's not necessarily repeatable.
Yeah. So if I was charging £20,000 to set up my software in a business and £5,000 a month, it's the £5,000 a month that's recognized in MRR, not the setup fee.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
Brilliant. And it matters because it's the foundation of every other SaaS metric. Obviously, the annual recurring revenue is your monthly recurring revenue times 12. As I say, we will share this deck in the masterclass. We'll share this deck in the podcast. If people want to dive into them any deeper, they can. But there are many more complicated terms than this. So I'm not going to spend too long on monthly MRR. But I do think the waterfall analysis is really interesting here because I want to capture this new and expansion MRR, monthly recurring revenue. So there's new contracts you've won, and expansion revenue is where you persuade a customer to increase the amount of their subscription. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So you sign a customer, you start them on a one level of revenue. Obviously, it's great if you can build that relationship, whether it's land and expand sales strategy, or there are sort of natural upsells, more users, etc. The ideal customer is one that you can grow over time.
Yeah. And what you've done actually in this waterfall analysis is show the sort of starting MRR. Then we've added in new wins for that month and any expansions. And then the two things to keep your eye on is customers who reduce the amount of money that they're paying you each month for whatever reason. And that's called contraction. And then the hideous word churn, which is where a customer cancels their contract and they have to get netted off against your starting monthly recurring revenue. You add on any new and expansion revenue, you take off any churn and any contracted revenue, and that leaves you with your new number at the end of the month.
Yeah, that's right. Some people call it a waterfall. Some people call it a snowball. I've even heard the phrase corkscrew, but effectively you are measuring this on a month-to-month basis with your starting balance. You end up with a closing balance, and then it moves forward, and you measure that going forward. And that's the basis of things like the quick ratio, the magic number, etc. is really important to keep. The other thing that perhaps we should have said in this is that in new and expansion, you also should think about if you get reactivation revenue as well. So that's where a customer leaves and then comes back within a certain period of time. That counts as reactivation, and you would include that in your new and expansion MRR.
Great. Fantastic. And then moving to annual, obviously very simple, MRR times 12. It's your normalized annual value of recurring revenue. It is the number by which most software businesses are scaled by. What is your ARR? It tends to be, if you're growing fast and you're approaching that magic £1 million of ARR number, good things start to happen. You start to get real pull from investors who you're very much on their radar now. But ARR is the sort of overall number, if you like. It's almost like a scorecard, isn't it? Perhaps it shouldn't be. And there are other numbers that are important, but that really is the kind of scorecard on which software businesses are recognized.
I think if you were to look across many investors, many venture firms, websites, they put out their investment criteria. They use ARR as one of those metrics that they're looking for. So yeah, a very important number.
Yeah. And just to repeat, exclude one-time fees and any usage fees, because that is not in your monthly recurring revenue. That will appear somewhere else in your P&L. Am I right, Simon?
Yes, it certainly appears in revenue, but it's not within your sort of recognized recurring revenue. I think maybe one nuance here is that to say that a lot of pricing models now are focused on usage or transactions. So the world is changing a bit, and there's quite a lot of literature written about how you should account for usage-based pricing models in a sort of annual recurring revenue environment. So it's not quite you should exclude all usage-based billing. It's actually if that's your model, you need to find a way of normalizing for usage that clearly varies from month to month or year to year.
Yeah, a really good point. And as you say, that's increasingly becoming a model or a package that companies are using.
Yeah.
Okay. Won't run through the ARR snowball effect, but it's very similar to the waterfall, as you say, often called a snowball. But in the slides, you'll be able to see a worked example of across a year, how you open your new revenue, your expansion revenue, any contraction and any churn. I'm moving on because I think there's some really important, more important metrics. There are critically important metrics, but perhaps metrics that people haven't heard before that I think is important to stop and talk about. And let's look at one of those now, which is gross revenue retention. And the formula for this is your starting monthly recurring revenue minus your churned monthly recurring revenue divided by that starting MRR. Can you explain the relevance and the importance of the GRR number?
Yeah. So very simply, it's a measure of how much revenue you lose over a period, whether that's per month or per year. We use the word churn. How many customers are you losing? It ignores any customers that you're winning. It ignores the upsell that we talked about. We'll get onto that when we talk about NRR. But it's a very simple measure of how sticky your product is in any given period.
Yeah. And again, it excludes upsells and it isolates the revenue that's being retained from your existing customers. It's a number that says we have sticky customers or we don't. And
Yeah.
again, very good early lead indicator if this number starts dropping, that customers just aren't staying with you for any period of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's look now at net revenue retention, because I think these two can get confused. So as the slides will say, and this may not come across great on a podcast, but your net your net revenue retention number is this is your starting MRR plus your expansion MRR minus your churns. And again, divided by your starting MRR. So explain the relevance of NRR and why it's so important.
Yeah, so I think this is, if we compare it to gross revenue retention, or with gross revenue retention, that percentage that you end up with from calculating can never be more than 100%.
Yeah.
You only lose revenue through churn. What net revenue retention is intended to do is provide another side to that equation, which is how much are you winning? Are you winning business faster than you are losing business? Are you able to expand clients at a greater rate than you are either getting churn or contraction from clients?
Yeah.
And overall, you can have a percentage here that is over 100%. And the benchmarks will tell you that the best businesses end up with a net revenue retention percentage of 110, 120%, maybe. Some even do better than that. But the idea is it allows you to see whether you're growing overall. And when you use that in conjunction with your gross revenue retention calc, you get to that balance. You get to see what's working, what isn't working.
Yeah. And in simple terms, this is explained to me that if you've got a bucket with some holes in it and you're pouring water in the top, how fast is the water coming out the bottom? And as a percentage, as you say, we can get it above 100%. If you didn't have this number in here, then your churn or your churn could be masked, can't it? Because you can say,
Yeah.
oh, we're winning 100,000 new MRR a year, but you're losing 150,000 a year. Then it's clearly masking the situation and you've got a problem within your organization.
And that's why it's good to look at both calculations together. Yep.
And I would say through all this that we've put worked examples in the slide deck. And I'm not, for the sake of speed, I'm not going to go through all of the worked examples here. But my recommendation, I'm sure yours would be as well, if you are a software founder and you're watching this, is get your own numbers out and apply your own numbers to these metrics and create your own set of SaaS metrics based on what's happening in your organization. Would that be a good exercise for everybody to do?
I think it's a great exercise for people to do. And I would start by taking the basic formulas that have been set out. It could be that some businesses have nuances or slightly different economics that mean that there are maybe adjustments that need to be made or accommodated for. But as a starting point, it's good to see where you are, and then you can work from there as to where the challenges are, and also any adjustments that you might need to make to give a more fluent picture of your business.
Yeah. And that might be tweaking sales and marketing to bring in more MRR, or it might be adjusting customer services to make sure your customers are staying with you as a business. But if you started off with 100K, this is GRR, gross revenue retention. You had £10,000 of churn. You end on 90,000 because you've lost 10,000. Your gross revenue retention, therefore, is 90%. And then your net revenue retention, of course, takes into account your expansion. So in the same worked example, 100,000 would be your starting MRR. You expand, you get an extra 20,000 of MRR. But again, you've lost that 10,000 of churn. So therefore, your NRR is 110,000, which is 110%. So get your own numbers out and work them through these metrics. And it's a really good lead indicator for you to look at.
Yeah.
Okay, here's one that I suspect most people wouldn't have heard of, the quick ratio. Before I dive into what the formula is, tell me the value of the SaaS quick ratio.
Yeah, so it's it's a measure of sales efficiency, and it's your ability to win business at a greater rate than you lose business. It's a very interesting metric to look at.
Okay. And the formula is your new MRR, how much new MRR you're winning in a month. Plus you can chuck in there any expansion MRR that you've won in that month. So it's new and expansion, and it's divided by your churned MRR, what's gone, what you've lost, and your contracted MRR, if any. So it's actually quite a simple formula when you're working through new and expansion on the top line, and you divide that by churned and contraction on the bottom line. And I guess this isn't a percentage, this is more of a ratio. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So the best businesses are able to create new and expansion revenue at about 4x the amount that they churn and contract. So that would be the best businesses. If you're above a ratio of 2, so you're winning twice as much business as you're losing, that's okay. Once you start getting below 2, that's something to worry about and something to investigate as to why you're losing business or whether it's that you're not winning business at the rate that you should.
Yeah. So again, in the download, in the slide deck, we'll give you a quick ratio in action. But in this instance, they've won £50,000 of new MRR in a month. They've added another 20,000 of expansion MRR to make that top line 70,000. And then below the line, they've churned 10,000 and they've contracted 5,000. So that gives you 70,000 on the top line, 15,000 on the bottom line. Your ratio is 4.67. And as you say, that's a very strong number to have. You're winning business 4 times faster than you're losing business. And you're gaining, if you like, $4.56 for every $1 that you lose. So a really useful metric to keep your eye on. Let's move on now to the magic number. By the way, if you're a member of the Venture Sales Academy, Simon has very graciously agreed to be an expert in the Academy. So if you need to reach out to Simon and ask him a particular question, you can do that if you are a member of the Venture Scale Academy. But also in there, we have our own founder coach, ChatGPT, where we've put in this slide deck and everything we've ever written, both our books, all of our infographics, our brain dumps that are on LinkedIn, everything possible has got into this GPT. And so if you want to ask it, as one of our Academy members did recently, who's a founder, put in, can you explain to me SaaS magic number? And the GPT came up, asked him the questions and his numbers, actually explained this to him within the GPT, which we thought was really cool. So if you want to become a Venture Scale Academy member, you get that GPT as part of your membership. But I love SaaS magic number. Talk to me about SaaS magic number, Simon. Tell me what it is and why it's important.
Okay. I think if we just covered the quick ratio that measures how much you're winning versus how much you're losing, but it doesn't tell you much about what inputs you're having to make to achieve that particular number. In other words, it just looks at the revenue side of things. The magic number builds in the cost element of this. And what it does is it looks at the spend that you incurred on sales and marketing to achieve the ARR growth that you're reporting. And it normally offsets that by typically a quarter, but depending on your sales cycle, you can adjust the offset. But it's really, the idea is it's a measure of sales efficiency, sort of sales function efficiency. The goal is to prove that you can win business at a cost-effective rate.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's your net new ARR from the last quarter, and then you annualize that. So you multiply it by 4 to give you the annual number, divided by last quarter's sales and marketing spend. And as you say, it measures how efficiently your sales and marketing spend is turning into new revenue. And that's why it's magic. It's a brilliant number. I suspect when people watch this masterclass, they're going to be pausing it along the way, and they're going to be grabbing they're grabbing their own numbers and calculating what the magic number is. What I like again is you very kindly gave us a worked example here. So if you brought in 200,000 of net new ARR in the last quarter, you then annualize that up to 800,000. And then if you spend £500,000 in the last quarter on sales and marketing spend, you would then divide that 800,000 by the 500,000 to give yourself a magic number of 1.6. Now, that I'm guessing is a brilliant number. What is a good magic number? What is a bad magic number?
Yeah, so I think if you were to look at the benchmarks that are publicly available, typically produced by venture firms, they rate anything over 0.75%, 75% as a good metric, or 0.75 as an absolute number. So 1.6 here would be a very good performance.
Yeah. It just shows that your business is investing money in sales and marketing, but it's turning straight into new ARR. So the business is running very,
Yeah.
very efficient. Okay, let's
And
move
I
on
think
to
you should say that, I think we should say that it would be an indicator that you should be investing more in sales and marketing than that.
That's a really good point. If you came up with a magic number of 1.6, you should be doubling down and doubling down. And if your number's less than that, I would guess in early stage, that's not unusual in an early stage to have a low magic number, or am I being too kind?
No, I'm sure you go through periods or stages. If you're still at founder sales stage, you might be doing quite well because you don't have much cost and you know your product. But as you scale your sales and marketing organization, it won't be efficient. You may still be trying to find your ideal customer profile. You may be tweaking the sales process, working out which channels work from a marketing point of view. That will lead to inefficiency. You're learning. The point is that you can dig into all of these numbers and take them the next level down and work out what's working, what's not, and then tweak. That's the great thing about these metrics, is that they give you a sort of a guiding light as to where the challenges are and what you can improve.
Absolutely. It's a dashboard, isn't it? It's a number set that you can glance at, any dashboard, and know how fast you're going, and know, where any challenges are coming. And you can get these numbers established very quickly by you or by your CFO or by your accountant. You can get these into a spreadsheet, the formulas into a spreadsheet very quickly. In fact, you've probably got a template, haven't you, Simon? You might be able to share with us where people can
I think
put the numbers in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's not difficult. These are not complex calculations. And I think the other thing is you need to look at these calculations in combination with each other. One metric on its own is useful, but when you look at them all together, it really gives you, you call it a dashboard. So I would call it a flight deck. It's everything that you need to build your business.
I love the concept of a flight deck. Rule of 40. Now, this I think is a relatively new SaaS metric, but tell me that I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong. Certainly when SaaS Metrics first started, it was one of the later ones to come along, but it's a really important metric for investors and is directly linked to valuation ultimately.
Yeah. And it's your revenue growth rate, your percentage growth, how fast you're growing as a percentage, plus your EBITDA margin. And it's the benchmark that combines both your revenue growth and your profitability as an organization. And it helps, as it says on the slide, balance growth versus burn. So burn, if you don't, those that don't know, is how much it's costing you to turn up to work every day, how much money you're burning through. Greater than 40%, so that's why it's called the rule of 40, am I right? Is a sign of health.
Yeah, no, that's right. In a target, if you can achieve above 40% metric here, you're doing very well. And actually in the top tier of SaaS businesses, the sad fact is that most SaaS businesses don't make that number, at least in the early days.
Yeah.
But it's a good metric because as we spoke about at the start of this, the traditional financial metrics don't necessarily work for SaaS businesses because of that delayed gratification of the revenue. That's why the rule of 40 was developed, because it gives you the degree of freedom, if you like, to put the pedal to the metal in terms of growing revenue if you think that you can use money effectively. And that may mean that you drop back down into sort of the loss situation. That's fine. If you're growing at 20% and you're still losing money, that's less good.
Yeah. So the number used here, if a company's growing at 60%, but they're burning at 20%, then they have a rule of 40. But equally well, one growing 10% to growing very slowly, which might be a later stage SaaS business, but has a 30% margin, also equals 40. And again, in the slide deck, you're going to see loads of worked examples where you could put your own numbers in here and follow that information through. I'm going to finish, I think, on this one, Simon, because I think we might try and cover the unit economics on a different masterclass, if that's all right, because I'm trying to keep these at around half an hour, 35 minutes. I remember when I was at school, apparently our attention span as humans doesn't go beyond 40 minutes. So we're narrowing in on that sort of level. So can we just cover off burn multiple then as the final one, I think, in this one, before we dive into, we'll do the SaaS, the unit economics on a different masterclass, I think. But burn multiple, again, what is it and why is it important?
So I think this is a metric that's very helpful in terms of keeping control of the business. If you've raised money and you have got a good chunk of investment in the bank, it's very easy to go spend that on different projects and to think that if you keep on investing, particularly in sales and marketing or wherever else, that you're going to achieve great growth. This is a metric to allow you to control that. And it's companies do things like cash flow forecasting, and that tells you when you're going to run out of cash. What the burn multiple does is tell you, but it's part of the metrics that tell you why you're running out of cash. Okay. And sorry, I've lost we might need to go back and do that one again.
That's okay. So let's move finally now to burn multiple in this section. And burn multiple as a formula is your net burn divided by your net new ARR. That's the formula. And it's telling you how much cash is spent for each $1 of new net ARR. That's what it says on the slide, Simon, but decode that for me. What is it and why is it important?
Yeah, so it's important because it provides you a measure with which you can help control the cash expenditure of the business and make sure that you're spending appropriately and wisely given your growth rate. So the idea is that you want to make sure that you have sufficient cash to reach your next milestone, whether it's raising money or getting to profitability. The burn multiple is used to help you measure that and look at, are you overspending or should you invest more?
Absolutely. It can be very volatile during the early stages because obviously that's when you're investing to grow and it doesn't account for long-term investments. But as a word example here, in a quarter, if you've got a net burn of £400,000 and a net new ARR of £200,000, then you're spending $2 to generate $1 of ARR. Whilst that's acceptable, there is room for efficiency. And this is a number that will change dramatically as you start up, grow up and scale up through the business. Would that be right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And you're absolutely right. It does depend on stage. But I think if you have been going a while and you are still at a ratio of 2, that I would start to get a bit worried, especially in today's funding environment. If you can get that ratio getting above 2, that might be a bit of a challenge for the business and your investors.
Brilliant. Okay, so I think we'll leave it there because it's about that 40-minute mark, which is where I wanted to leave it. I'm going to beg, borrow and steal another half an hour of your time to run through the unit economics. I know you're incredibly busy, but thank you for your time. For anyone watching or listening, we worked with Simon many times over the years. If you're in a situation where you need CFO advice at the very highest level without going out and hiring a CFO and having somebody with you full time, these are absolutely the right people to speak to. InfiniteCFO.com. Really hope that masterclass has given you at least an introduction and something to learn more about within SaaS metrics. And the next masterclass we do in this space, we will look at unit economics and those different terms. So thank you for your time, Simon. Much appreciated. And we'll catch you again really soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Take care. And see you on the next podcast.